So I'll start off by apologizing for the delay and also thanking you all for making time to come in and joining us for one of our many wonderful conference workshops and panel discussions that we have. My name is Hana. I am a member of the TPN National Board, and I welcome you on behalf of the Tigray Forum of North America. Today we have a wonderful conference for you, a workshop, a panel, and the first topic that we'll be talking about is building bridges outside Tigray. This is one of 3 panel discussions that we'll have. Right after this session, we'll have building bridges back to Tigray, and tomorrow we'll have one that says building bridges in Tigray. So I hope you all make time to come join us as we have many wonderful speakers from within and outside of our community. I'll start off by introducing our great moderators. You're probably already familiar with them. They are a force within our community, and they are the movers and shakers that have been leading advocacy the last couple of years and beyond. And we also have someone that's going to be talking about a topic that's very relevant to what we're talking about today. So I'll start off with the first bio. So we have Militi Barhana Meskel. Militi has spent over 2 decades fighting for social justice as a trained journalist and business owner of Denver's only activist and social justice cafe. She traveled to Sudan to interview Tigrayan refugees and has met with dozens of senators, representatives to advocate for the end of the war. She has also lost, unfortunately, 15 family members in the Tigray genocide. I'm sure you're all familiar with her. I'd like to present Militi. And next, we have Housein Gabramedhin, another force within the community. Housein is a Tigrayan American refugee who immigrated to the United States at the age of 1 from the Tigray region of Ethiopia. She leads diversity, equity, and inclusion at Plant Morin, a global accounting firm with offices across the USA, Asia, and Mexico. Throughout her work, she has developed and guided the firm's various DEI strategies, and she has affected the talent, clients, and communities that the firm serves. Before Plant Morin, Housein worked in the banking industry for over 12 years. Most recently, she was the VP at First Bank. And in addition to her professional experience, Housein has worked extensively in supporting nonprofits. She has years of serving on various boards, and she has, for the last 3 years, has co-founded 2 nonprofits, and one of them is Tigray Action Committee, and the other is United Women of the Horn. So you all know Housein as a force as an advocate for the Tigray genocide, and her sister founded Tigray Action Committee, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. And she's also founded United Women of the Horn, and she holds a bachelor's in communication with an emphasis in business and ethnic studies from the University of Colorado. Please give warm welcome. And next, we have Cornell Patel. Cornell Patel is from the Key Foundations program. He's the Chief Strategy Officer, and his mission with the organization is to provide financial wellness and stability amongst underserved communities. The mission is to ensure that families have stability and basic financial and wellness needs, so they are a springboard to future generations to retain, maintain, and earn generational wealth. He's also a founder of Connected Capital Company, an investing firm that provides access to investment opportunities in real estate, private equity, and venture capital. He has a passion for sharing, teaching, and teaching others about corporate, entrepreneurial, and cultural experiences, and he loves to pay it forward. We're very fortunate to have Cornell here to share his experiences as an immigrant whose family immigrated from India and Tanzania and the United Kingdom. Welcome Cornell for me, please. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Just to let you know what the objective of our discussion today is, our topic is going to be focusing on how we can build bridges outside of our Tigrayan community. So as you all know, within the last couple of years of our advocacy, something that we've all said at some time is how do we get out of our echo chamber? How do we ensure that we're just not speaking to one another? How do we ensure that our message is being shared and that we have allies across different communities and that our cause and our mission is being driven by others, not just Tigrayans? So this is a conversation that we're going to have today. We're going to have some questions for our panelists. We'll also have opportunities for you to ask questions. So if you have any, please jot them down. We have some sheets right in front of you that you should be able to make notes, and we'll make time for that as well, while also ensuring we allow our speakers to be able to add some of their input. All right, all set.
Thank you.
All right, so first question will go to Hazin. Hazin, from your experience, how do we foster meaningful connections with other communities, governments, organizations? If you can speak to the different work that you've done across on the Hill and other partnerships that you've had with various organizations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Hana, and thank you, TPN, for hosting this, and the Dallas community. This is awesome. So thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is where I've found success is being as authentically me as possible. And that means bringing my Tigrayan identity to everything I do. And so for me, you mentioned the Hill, which I could talk a little bit about, but I would first say to foster meaningful connections for Tigray, show up for Tigray as you are. In your workplaces, in any kind of opportunity that you have a platform, bring your Tigrayan identity to it. So for example, today I have Albaso, and the reason I have it is not for Wa'ala, which it's worked out that way, which is nice, but I'm getting an award for something for work on Thursday. And so I wanted to bring my Tigrayan identity with me. I wanted to give an opportunity to speak to Tigray. Anything I can do where I have an opportunity to be on a stage somewhere, Tigray comes with me, right? Whether it's my jewelry, whether it's my kidon, whatever it is, I make sure I infuse it so that it is a topic of conversation everywhere I go. I think later there's a question about even LinkedIn, right? And so to me, in my workspaces is where I found the most success in fundraising, in building awareness, and getting people who are not Tigrayan, not Ethiopian, to care about what's happening. It's because I'm bringing it with me everywhere I go. And so I think that would probably be my best piece of advice. Thank you. And so then on the Hill, maybe I'll get to a little bit later because I know we're a little bit short on time, but I think that's part of it. All of us have different identities within us that we can relate to. And so if you are able to tell your story and bring yourself, I think people can relate to it the most. So that would be my short answer. Thank you, Hana.
Thank you. And I do see that quite often on various social medias, that you take Tigray with you everywhere you go, and it's quite prevalent in the different platforms that we've all seen. Thanks, Hausein. So Meliti, just touching on that topic, how do you engage with broader initiatives that you can still maintain a solid identity and solid sense of your Tigrayan identity, but how do you still engage on broader initiatives to ensure that we're getting the word out?
That's a great question. Thank you, Hana, and thank you, TPN, for this opportunity. It's good that I'm sitting next to Hausein, because what Hausein and Ma'bel have done is nothing short of heroic with Tigray Action Committee and the work that they've done in building bridges within Ethiopia, which is still a challenge for many of us, including myself, because I'm so mad about what happened. So I'm glad to be next to you. And part of my answer is what Hausein said, which is, first of all, to take your identity somewhere, you have to know who you are. And this has been the biggest weakness for Tagaru over the past 2 years. So we have, there's a young woman named Susie in our community, and I call her the voice of the revolution. She was the one who would say, "Who are we? Tagaru. Who are we? Tagaru." And she would say it over and over again in her voice. I still hear it till now. And I think our biggest challenge is that our roots were not firmly planted in Tigray. It doesn't matter where you're born, like a flower. If a flower's roots are not healthy and strong, you can't bloom, right? So for us as Tagaru, our biggest challenge has been that we didn't prepare our children to be able to stand. So when this happened over the past 2 years, we were floundering initially. And that's changed now, because now, who are we? Tagaru, that's a very automatic response. We know who we are now. So really important. But back to how do we engage? The first thing is, we've already put Tigray on the map over the past 2 years. Everyone knows what Tigray is. My time is short. I like to talk a lot. I was on Tigray Media House over the past 2 years because I enjoy speaking. So I'm going to wrap this up really quickly. But the biggest thing I would say is, whatever you're doing, like Housen said, show up as a Tigrayan. It doesn't matter if it's work. I have a social justice cafe where I give a lot back to community, my intersecting communities, our intersecting communities. We're Black in America. We're Black women in America. We're all of these different things, but bring Tigray with you. Those are the people who helped us keep moving forward over the past 2 years. So I feel like I have more to say, but I know my time is up, so I'll circle back.
Yeah, thank you for the input. It's a topic that we can talk about probably for hours, especially when it comes to intersecting identities, our identity crisis with this war, and onwards and onwards. So thanks for touching on that, both of you, and for the work that you've done on that as well. Cornell, I'm going to come to you. Before I actually come to ask a question, because I think our community is quite familiar with Militsi and housing, I think it'd be good if you can provide some context into who you are, how you've connected. Just as a heads up for the rest of the community here, the organization and Cornell are the only vendor that we have that is not within the community. So it's quite relevant why we have him on this panel, because it speaks to the idea of how we can build bridges with other communities and how we can ensure that we're working as a collective. So if you don't mind, if you could just provide a quick context into who you are and how we got here.
Exactly. So my name's Cornell Patel, from Atlanta but live in Miami now. But my background is of the Indian community, especially a particular state called Gujarat. And similar to what you guys are doing, we have our national conventions as well within a subsect of Gujarat as well. So we'll have our national conventions, our youth conventions, and these are the same topics that we always speak about. But how I got connected with the Tigray community was through a mutual friend of mine. He happened to be Indian as well, but he's neighbors with Hylam, who's one of the main guys that's running this board as well. And so me and him just connected, and it was just mutual values that we had, whether it's in professionally, we were both in IT, philanthropy. We're part of the key foundation is like my philanthropy efforts to help underserved communities, and then also just entrepreneurship. So that was kind of our bond, our value, and then just learning about what's happening in Tigray, it kind of became very powerful for me. So, we're always looking for solutions to help people out, and this is how I've got connected.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, and shout out to Hayalom for the continuous partnership building. Just on that, now that you've provided that context, how does your community, the Indian community, the Gujarati community, how do you leverage the collective experience that you've had to be able to build bridges beyond your community?
Yeah, that's a great question. So initially, if you think about it, when the original, I guess, Indians that came in the 70s and 80s, they were very close, right? They were very within our community only, because one, there was a language barrier, there was a cultural barrier, there was a food barrier. But once they started having a common theme, like whether it's we want to own a business, we want to start thinking about generational wealth, what started happening is when they started taking those actions, they started meeting with bankers, lawyers, real estate agents, people within the cities that we live in, Chamber of Commerce members, and you get to tell the story of yes, I am Indian. This is kind of what my background is, and these are my goals and accomplishments. Can you help me out? And everybody loves an underdog, so they're always willing to help, And if they're not, there's always somebody else that's going to be willing to help as well. So we leverage, kind of our family members. We would, bring in our in-laws, our cousins, and we would build this community, but then we would leverage their networks. So if somebody's working in a corporate job profession and they know a lawyer, they know a banker, they know we would come back to these national conventions and say, hey, I know somebody that can help you out with, whatever you're trying to pursue. And so just naturally leveraging the people within your community and their networks is what's going to help you, go across the boundaries.
That's excellent. Thank you. That ties actually directly to the next question for Housing. Housing is a DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion expert, someone that does that in your professional realm, but also for Tigray. What steps do you think that our community can use DEI tools to be able to ensure that Tigray, the Tigrayan community, is included in wider organizations and networks?
Yeah. So I think Meliti kind of touched on the intersectionality that we all have, which is really just the layers that we are, right? So Tigrayan, American woman, there's a lot of layers, and you can use the diversity within you to connect to others. What I would say about the diversity in our community, maybe I'd start by saying there's so much diversity in our community, and I sometimes don't think we know or sometimes even accept it in certain spaces. That's one place that I think we can be better as a community. For example, just even in kind of gender representation, when we see leadership, like for example, look at this event, look at this panel, look at TPN, look at a lot of the Tigrayan-based organizations that have started over the past 2-3 years. A lot of them are women-run and women-led. But when you look at senior leadership across some of the top organizations all the way to the Tigrayan government, women are not represented in those spaces. And so I think that we need to acknowledge our diversity and the strength that having different ideas and different voices really bring to a conversation and look to improve that. I think you asked about how we can use that in different spaces, Mish. Yeah. So I think it's exactly what Meliti was saying. I think it's understanding who you are and looking how you can leverage that in the different spaces you're in, right? So we are Black Americans. How can we get into certain Black spaces that can leverage and push the Tigrayan initiative? For example, there's the CBC, which is the Black Caucus for Government, the Congressional Black Caucus. Can we be in those spaces? Can we make sure we have Black Tigrayan representatives in government that can push our agenda, right? We have to accept our diversity and utilize it in different ways like that. So one example.
One of great examples, thank you. And I do appreciate the comment around ensuring gender parity and not just talking about it, making sure that it's not just a check mark, but we're actually putting it into action. Because as Housing said, same person. As Housing said, we are leading the initiatives and we are in the front line, so it's about time. The next question that actually will tie directly into that, Meliti, I do notice that you work really well across various organizations. Although you are a member of the community in Denver, a leader there, I do see you in various international, global, far-reaching organizations. Can you provide some examples from your work, all the interactions that you've had with various communities? Provide examples of how Tigrayans have effectively built bridges and what lessons that we can learn from them.
That's a really good question. One of my mentors is a former mayor in Denver. His name is Mayor Wellington Webb. And one thing I love about him is, number one, he's big on tell your own story because someone else will if you don't. And so I've been pushing that for the past few years because as Tigrayans, we haven't done that enough. And to build a relationship before you can get to a bridge and help one another, they have to know who you are. And Tigrayans, we've been like hidden in plain sight. On a national level, you look at the WHO director, right? You look at Daniel Yohannes, who worked with the Obama administration. Like Tigrayans we're here and we're hidden in plain sight. So first of all, people have to know who you are. The other thing Mayor Webb said to me always was, make your friends before you need them. And so you have to form those relationships before you need them. So we were like a fish out of water the past 2 years because we're like, hey, why won't you help us? Why won't you do this? Why won't you do that? Women are being raped on a massive scale. Children are being starved to death. Why don't you care? We didn't, even though those are universal human things that we should not have to fight for, we didn't have the relationships in place in order to make those things work. So an example of what has worked for us, I'll just tell you about the Tigray Community Center. I'll take it all the way down to that very basic level. The Tigray Community Center in Colorado, I'm now the president, it's been about a year. And thank you, first woman in that position, speaking of women. But one thing we've done really, really well is because our board is young, because our board grew up here, we have relationships. And so in a year, actually less than a year, we've been able to raise over $400,000 for programming, for capital improvements, all of that because we had relationships in place before we needed them. So people that we've helped, whether it's people running for office, whether it's other organizations being on their boards, but we did that work ahead of time. So as Tagaru, we need to make sure we're doing the work now, because you never know. I'm not saying you form superficial relationships like I'll do this for you so you can do something for me later, but what I'm saying is you never know who you'll need and when you'll need them, and you also have to provide that as well. So
Yeah, that's right.
That ties into my next question. All of us have seen I think there was a post around the Denver community acquiring a successful proposal, right? And one thing that we've all been discussing throughout this war is how do we diversify? How do we ensure that we're including fund diversification when we're fundraising? Because it's Tagaru taking out money from their pockets to another Tigrayan organization, and then the region opened up and now you have to support family back home. So people that weren't already, that are just being really exhausted, right, from different avenues. So I remember when we saw the post and it said, Denver community just secure funds, everyone was in awe, first of all. Second, what tips do you have for other communities? How can we leverage what you've done, the lessons that you've learned, beyond what you've already mentioned of relationship building authentically? How do we ensure that we use that whenever it's proposal writing, fundraising, to include other people outside our community, so we're diversifying the way we raise funds?
yeah, so the grant that you're talking about was a $250,000 capital grant that we got for the community center to build a new home. Yeah. So the first thing I want to say is don't listen to people who tell you things are impossible, because there are very seasoned professionals in fundraising and nonprofits who said, you'll never get this grant. You've never had a grant before, your programming sucks. Just kidding. But it wasn't in line, it wasn't where it needed to be. You know, you guys have a lot of work to do before you can apply for something like this. And I remember telling someone, I was like, that's not how my God works. I don't know how yours works, but mine doesn't work like that. So, but my advice, first of all, I want to say, because I've talked to several communities since then who want to understand what we did, and there's no magic pill, there's no magic like do these 3 things and it'll work for you. But the first thing I want to say is we all have to be, and I think we generally are, an open book. So Denver did it and we had a formula, so let me share the formula with you. Here's what we did, here's what you need to have in place. Copy it. Let me just give it to you, adapt it to your community, and then just use it again. Like, we shouldn't have to keep recreating these things. So I invite Wa'ala to organize a Zoom. I'm happy to come on and talk to leaders around the country about what we did for our community center to get these grants. So Mabrat's shaking her head, nodding. So hopefully she'll help us organize that. But there's a number. I'm going to take like 1 minute more than I'm supposed to on this one. Sorry. Rama's like, 30 seconds. Rama's where my grandmother lives, by the way. I love that name so much. But anyways, there's a number of things. The first thing that I can tell you, if nothing else, when you leave here, one thing you should absolutely do is get your programming in order. You should be able to describe your programs to anybody. For example, we have Tigrinya classes is the easy one, but you also have to be able to quantify that. So we tell them, we have Tigrinya classes, here's the age group, here's how many students come, here's why we do it. We don't just do it because we want them to speak another language, which is also great. This is an identity building thing. This is how we get firm roots in who you are and where you come from. That's why Tigrinya class is so important, other than also being bilingual. So we're able to say that, and we can say how many people we serve. We have videos, we have photos. Another one is Ashenda. So Ashenda we probably have the best, but we have the best Ashenda in the country outside of Tigray. I swear to God, it's a festival for us. And so we have, I'm not exaggerating, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. I probably am not lying if I say thousands of people who show up for our festival, Ashenda. And so what we did is we made it a program. So it's empowering women and girls. There's, this year in particular, I'm giving away stuff that a lot of people don't know, but we're gonna do a lot around recognizing women entrepreneurs in Denver and what the work that they're doing. But we built a whole program around Ashenda. And so this is something that other people can come and tap into. And you can get funding for this. There's funding for these things. And so my advice is get your programs in order, understand what you're doing before you go ask someone for money, because you have to be able to be very, very clear about what you're doing. And there's a lot of money out there, but you have to do certain things. So Wa'ala will host a Zoom. I'm talking it into existence, so it will happen. And we'll share more information because there's not enough time.
No. That's perfect, thank you. And as the person that is leading in philanthropy for TPN National, I will for sure promise to follow up with you, not only for our community here, but for everyone that needs it. And I do appreciate that you're such an open book, because once you've made it, it's really important to always keep the door open for the next person, and that's really, really appreciated. It's needed in our community. So, Cornell, I'm going to come to you. I think it's important to share and to learn from other communities. So from your community, what have you learned? What lessons do you have in terms of how you've collaborated with other marginalized communities? What lessons can we learn from you as a community that's trying to do that as well?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes to what Millie had said, was you have to be creative, right? Because you're going to have people that are going to say, no, it can't be done this way. You have to do A, B, C, D, right? But at the end of the day, when you have a goal, you're going to have four things. You're going to have desire, you're going to have belief in yourself, you're going to have conviction and commitment, right? So when you have the desire, that's the goal. Like, I want to accomplish something. Second thing is, I can believe that I can make this happen, no matter how many naysayers are there, how many people will say yes or no. And then the conviction is the sacrifice that you're making to accomplish those goals. Now, to answer your question, commitment is no matter what happens, you're still going to make it happen regardless. So, let's just say that you want to go to a traditional route and they're saying, no, you can't do it. Well, there's plenty of other creative ways, and I know a lot of immigrants were always creative in somehow, somewhere, right? Because we're bringing in our culture, we're bringing in our like faith to say, let's make it happen. So, if it's like your youth, your kids' youth soccer games or basketball games, meet the parents out there, tell them your story, right? And then say, hey, can I get your advice on something, or should I do something X, Y, Z? And they're always going to help you find creative ways as well to come through it. And that's where that commitment comes in. You're not going to take no for an answer. You're going to find another avenue to get there.
Thank you. I see everyone writing notes, so I really appreciate it. Hossein, I'm going to come to you. You mentioned LinkedIn as being one of the tools that you've used. I would say that you're probably the champion of Tigray advocacy on LinkedIn. What can all of us do? How can we leverage our professional experiences and our connections to ensure Tigray is always in the conversation?
I think, I guess I would even sum up what Cornell and Meleti have talked about too, as to you have to start with courage. I think a lot of us are fearful that if we bring this part of our identity to work, that it's inappropriate or that people won't be open to it. And I think you really have to have the courage to ask, to be brave enough to say, I need something and it's important enough for me to share it on this professional platform. I think a lot of us separate that part of identity, especially when it comes to war and genocide and things that are really, really hard to talk about. We don't feel like it's appropriate to talk about at work, or LinkedIn or other kind of social media that you might be on. And what I learned over the past 2.5 years is that there are so many people out there that want to help us. Meliti talked about grant money. There's so many opportunities out there, but we have to have the courage to ask for it, and to stand up and share what we're going through. In my wildest dreams, I would have never thought I'd have this nonprofit, Tigray Action Committee. But now we have 4 feeding centers across Tigray. We have one in Shire, Hausen, Mekelle, and Adigrat. And that would have never happened if I didn't have the courage to just talk about it. Say, I need something, I need your help. This is happening to my family. Please, please help us. And so I think you have to have the courage and be brave enough to be personal with people that you work with, the people that you might think don't care. There are a lot of people out there that want to help us and do care.
Can I add? an additional thing is, one thing also is, in 2023 we have great technology and social media. So utilize those tools, right? Even ChatGPT can figure out something, right? If I need to get funding or grants, ask ChatGPT, maybe they can come up with some clever ideas. And use social media, Instagram, TikTok, right? Tell the story, because there's always somebody that's gonna find you, right? That can say, we're working on X, Y, Z, let's help you out, you know? So leverage those tools as much as possible as well.
That's perfect. Yes, we definitely have to ensure that we're leveraging all these new tools that come to make them work for us. On that topic, because you all mentioned courage at some point, on the other side of courage is fear. And the reason that maybe young professionals or new professionals may be a bit more fearful of talking about Tigray in different settings outside their community is they're afraid of biases. So I know from both your work, Housen, and Militi, you've been very visible, whether in your personal, professional lives, about Tigray, right? I'm sure that's come at a cost. So how do you encourage, what tips can you give the rest of the community, young folks, new professionals? How can you bring your full self to every room that you go into while battling these biases and ensuring that you always lead with courage? I'm going to direct this to Militi.
Ooh, you got my heart beating with that question, because it's such a good question. And the way you do that is to know who you are. I swear to God, the more you know about being a Tigrayan, the prouder you are. And that was the issue. We didn't know enough about what Tigray and Tigrayans for generations and generations and generations and generations have contributed to Africa. I'm going to even go bigger than where we are right now, to Africa, to the world. And when you talk about these things, people are blown away, because a story has been told about us that is completely 100% untrue. And we haven't done the work to teach our kids what to do. And our children saved us. Let's be honest. Over the past 2 years, it was young people born in America. Some don't speak Tigrinya. Some have never been back to Africa anywhere, including Tigray. I don't mention the other place. I only say Tigray. Obviously, I have trauma I still need to deal with. But it was those young people who saved us. So we have to strengthen and make sure we know who we are. And when you know who you are, you're excited to go talk about that. You're excited to share that in different circles. And that's who I am. And it came at great personal sacrifice. There were times, because I used to be in journalism, and obviously came back to that with TMH, the resistance media, who we should all support, by the way, regardless. I don't care what anyone has to say. It got us through the past 2 years. Let's continue to support them. But, you know, and I had a lot of friends, a lot of connections in that media world. I know I'm going over, I promise.
You're good,
I'll wrap it up right now. But they would do stories. For example, there was a story on CPR, Colorado Public Radio. There were stories in our local newspapers, because people know me, we have a relationship that we built before. And pretty much immediately after every single exposure that we got, there's a group of people that would, that are pro-genocide, that would write a letter or email or do a call campaign to the media organizations. And they would say, Militi is a terrorist. Militi is, all these things. And these people who know me would laugh. And thank God they would, because they know who I am. And so it came at a lot of sacrifice, because I had to keep defending our humanity. I had to keep defending and say, you may not understand anything about them. It makes me emotional. You may not understand any of the politics of the Horn of Africa and in Tigray. But do you agree with me that raping children is wrong? Do you agree with me that starving people is wrong? And those were the stories, those were the things that we had to keep saying and make clear. And that's how we won over those conversations. But to know a Tigrayan is to be very proud of Tigray and all that we've accomplished. So that would be my advice, is know exactly who you are. And the more you know, you realize you don't know anything. You got to keep learning. But we are a storied people with a rich history, and you should be so proud, so proud.
Thank you. You're making me emotional.
I'm sorry.
No, but that's a word because yes, focus on the humanity, and if it's a human on the other side, they will hear you and they will avoid all their biases. Before I go ahead and open it to the audience for questions, so think about your questions for those of you that have some, and Rama and Saron will walk around and get your questions. Just in that moment of sharing, I do also want to provide some more information. As the resident Canadian, I always have to bring Canada onto the map. So our work for advocacy has been, it's been really great. It's been a long road. We've learned a lot from all of our colleagues in the US. Something that really aligns with this topic that I'd like to share is every time we would meet with members of parliament or any sort of government officials, anyone really, the first question they would ask us is, what's the population? How many Tigrayans do we have in the city or in this province or in this country? And so every single conversation, obviously they're asking that data, they need to know what's your voting power, how much do I need to care? So we would, dance around that question because we're not a huge community. But at the end, just recently, actually a couple of months ago, what that conversation led us to is to build alliances with different communities that have also been affected by genocide. So there's an alliance now that has formed. It's called the Alliance of Genocide Victims, and it has members of the Uyghur community, the Tamil community, Tigray. There's a lot. There's Tibet. There's a whole bunch. Ukraine. And so the purpose was all of these communities that have been affected by genocide, they get that same question. So we said, why don't we come together? So we are no longer just speaking about our community. We're saying you need to stop genocide, period. What's that number? We'll tell you all of our numbers combined, because at the end of the day, it's the humanity that matters. You don't need to know what the voting power is. And that has built a really great collective. And we've had actually MPs and different government leaders knock on our door to say, hey, we heard that there's a new alliance. So that's something, maybe it's a best practice, maybe it's a shared experience, something that we can share with our peers and our colleagues here, but it really applies on how do we ensure that Tigrayans are resting, that you're not always speaking about this topic? How do you ensure that other people are also telling your story? How do we get to that point? So I'll pause here and we'll get anyone that has questions, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll have my colleagues will walk over and get your question. Anyone else have questions? Please feel free to come in. Thank you.
My name's Hana. I'm from Dallas. I wanted to it's more of a pitching an idea. What if Hausian, I think I tweeted this to you before, I don't know if you remember, but the Tigray Oromo Solidarity Network, where we bring both of our communities together and show how both of our communities have been affected by the barbarism that Ethiopian nationalism has inflicted on both of our communities, and bring us together and fight back against the narrative that the Ethiopian nationalists have pushed forward, and just strengthen both of our communities. So I just wanted to know, do you think that's something that we could all do together, just moving forward, and is it doable, and do you think that it would be of good benefit to both of our communities?
First of all, it's so nice to meet you in person. You're so beautiful. Hi. So yeah, thank you. I do remember your tweet, and I do think it's a wonderful idea first, and I do think there are different orgs that are doing that. The other organization that I co-founded is called United Women of the Horn, and I think you've been tuned into some of the events we've done, but it's bringing women across Ethiopia, which I too have trauma and have a hard time saying that word, but together to stand against kind of the tyranny we've seen that has impacted all of our communities. And so that's one, but I know there's a few others, like there's Solidarity of Nations and a few other organizations that are really trying to bring those impacted in the Horn together to collaborate on stopping this. So yes, and I think there could be more, right? I think when we talk about the courage and we talk about the opportunity, there is more opportunity out there. So why can't Hana do that, right? Why can't we find opportunities to build additional of ways to do that. So Hana, I would honestly encourage you to feel emboldened to do that. And I've read some of your pieces. I know you're writing now too. And so I think that I'm proud to see the work that you're doing as well. And I think there's absolutely more we could be doing there. She.
Hi, I'm Mila. I just want to first of all say all of you are amazing. I've had a chance to talk to some of you personally. I love it. Thank you guys so much for everything that you're doing. My question is, I guess I'm trying to focus on sustainability, right? So my question would be, as you're doing this really important work, obviously it's very emotional, it's very taxing, and it takes a lot out of you. So I would like to hear individually, like, what are you guys doing to make sure that you're also taking care of yourself? And if there's any like tips or any feedback that you can give anyone else of like, hey, don't be afraid to do this when you feel like you need to. So I'm just curious how, because I think the work is really important, but it is also, I've seen over and over again people burning out or also just leading down like a dangerous path. So I would just be curious to know what you guys are doing.
Is it okay if I start?
Sure.
First, Mela, I want to just give you a shout out for your brand, Shop Gonjo, and all the work that you do in our community. So thank you so much. She is selling Kiran in the back if you want to buy some of her shirts or any kind of merchandise. She's amazing. I'm wearing my Zuhair pen. You encouraged me to wear mine. You were wearing yours yesterday, right? And that's who I think about when I think about burnout, and I think about how we've been impacted in our community because we aren't taking breaks. So it makes me a little emotional to think about it. But I think you're absolutely right. Like we have to find ways to refresh, And one thing that the Denver community does that's really beautiful, and I see Danny not paying attention, laughing in the background, Danny Denver, but his brother and a few other members in the Denver community, they have Monday yoga sessions. And it's a way for Tigrayans to come together and just do yoga together. I know my cousin Harik just did one this morning for the community here, Burhan, you might know her as, and she did a really beautiful session this morning. And so for me personally, this is the diversity in our community, but I like Reiki, and I'm sure nobody knows what that is, maybe? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I really like that. It helps me refresh and find some peace, but that's what I do. So thank you for that.
I want to address sustainability more than self-care because I'm terrible at self-care and I'm trying to figure that out. Although you're right, Denver has done a really good job, especially the young men, with the yoga, and they also do a hiking club. So once, I don't think it's regular, but like every couple of weeks, few weeks or something, they go on a hike, which is really cool. There goes Danny Denver. Shout out to Danny Denver, who does a lot in our community. But around sustainability, I would say none of us have to be so self-sacrificial that we don't ask anyone else for help. So that goes even on a very basic level. I think about the community center because that's where I'm like really focusing my time, because in a way watching our community grow is healing for me. Putting like the structures in place is healing for me, because then I know how much easier that's going to be for whoever comes behind me. But around sustainability, to me, that means it can be financial. So like our elders have carried our community center for 30 years. That's not sustainable. It's, Tagaru irkum no wihiyu. You're so generous, so very, very generous. But we need our community to support us. We need our greater community to do that. So to me, it's diversifying our financial support. It's getting people to come in, if they know IT and technology, to build infrastructure for us so it's easier. And we had a lot of folks who came in and did that over the past 2 years, donated their time and services. But I would just say figuring out ways to make your organizations survive beyond you is the biggest challenge that we have. And by doing that, you do give yourself a break, in a sense. So I would just highlight that.
Can I add something to the way the Indian community does it? So yeah, you're right. Like, you can't help others if you can't help yourself first, right? And I know it sounds selfish, but if you don't have your mentals, you don't have your physical, it's very hard to help on a bigger scale. So what our community does is, we'll have regional, sports tournaments, whether it's a cricket tournament or this volleyball tournament, golf tournaments, something along those lines. But what I've noticed in our community is whatever city or state that you're in, Wednesday nights or Sunday nights. I don't know why it's Wednesday or Sunday. It's just convenient for them, I guess. But they'll have like volleyball or they'll play cricket together. And then we're like, you know what? Let's host a regional tournament, right? So that's kind of like our outlet out of, you know, all the stresses that are going on, right? While you're working at family, work, you know, back and helping out the community. And so those are kind of like tricks and trades that are going to help out. But then it's also when you're talking it out and you're talking about your problems or I'm stressed because of X, Y, Z, because you're in a collective group, you're going to find solutions somewhere. Somebody's going to say, have you tried X, Y, Z? Like, shameless plug, but have you tried KFP, right? Like there's an app that can help you, you know, manage your stress. It's a gamified place to work, right? So, you know, don't be ashamed to talk about it when you guys are trying to organize like even something basic like a hiking club or a tennis club or something along those lines, yeah.
And if I can add just one more thing about self-care is therapy. I know as Tagaro, we're, you know, we don't want to, when we hear therapy or counseling or whatever, we think like a mental problem, someone has a mental issue, but no, it's really not. It's a really healing thing. And at our community center, we got a grant to be able to pay for therapy for young people. And there are young people taking advantage of it. And I'm so glad that it's an opportunity. So we shouldn't be ashamed of that. It's very normal. We have been traumatized over the past few years, and this has happened before. It's cyclical. Our parents went through it. Our grandparents went through this. So don't be afraid to seek out therapy. It's okay. It's completely normal. So.
Okay, my name is Girmay or Gigi, and I want to say welcome to Wa'ala, to all of you. I was in Ghana last month, and then when they start, you know, such a meeting, you know what they say? Akwaba, which means welcome. And then I want to say Akwaba to all of you. When I go to my question, first, you know, I would like to start with Sister Melita. You know, Sister Melita, she is doing a very wonderful job for Tigrayan communities in Colorado. I would like to appreciate her, and then also I would like to send my admiration to Sister Melita. You know, very recently, we have completed phase 1 to bring all African communities in one umbrella. We have completed phase 1. Now we are going to phase 2. I would like to ask Sister Melita, do you think it is good to bring African communities in the US in one umbrella to work together, to request funds, and then to bring, you know, economic empowerment to our African communities? Do you agree on that? Are you also interested to work with the umbrella which was started in Denver? This is my number 1 question. 2, I would like to bring it to Housing Gabramedhin. She's a good friend of mine. I know her, you know, when she was working with First Bank. She has helped, you know, so many Tigrayan in Denver area. So my question to Housing is, she is also a co-founder of a non-profit organization with her sister, as far as I know. Do you agree to work Tigrayan non-profit organization all over the United States as one umbrella? Which means that, you know, we have identified there are about 50 Tigrayan non-profit organizations in the US. Do you think it is time to bring them together in one umbrella, even though they are independent, to work together? Do you agree on that? Number 3, I go to Cornell Patel, an Indian guy. And then I know, you know, Hati Marisati, the film, which was a long time ago. I was in high school or in elementary school. I was watching Indian movies like Hati Marisati Nehi Nehi Jala Nehi.
Great.
So I think he worked with the Key Foundation. I have some contact with the Key Bank, in Denver area. They are helping also our nonprofit. Do you think the Key Foundation can help our Tigrayan or our African nonprofit organizations? Can you collaborate or can you work on that? Thank you so much.
Can I start? Yeah. That's Gurmai, also from Colorado. I'm just going to call you the closer because he basically just made us force us to commit to something. No, I'm kidding. They're good questions. About the African communities coming together, one of our weaknesses is when we think about strategies and partnerships and who are our key alliances, we were jumping over Africa. We were looking at Europe. We were looking at the United States. We were looking at white folks, let's be honest. What we didn't do was build the alliances with other African brothers and sisters. That was a huge miss for us. And it's true for all over the continent, by the way. It's not unique to Tagaru. But some of the strongest advocates have been other Africans once they understand, because our struggle is very similar in different parts of Africa. Unfortunately, we're dealing with tyrants, we're dealing with the Gulf states, and their drones, we're dealing with proxy wars and all these other nations who want to control Africa and resources. So we need to build those alliances. So what Girmay and what a number of folks are doing in Colorado with building the coalition is really, really, really important work. And I admire that, and I want to support that. Will I work with you all? I will support you. My commitment is to the Tigray community of Colorado right now because we have such a big project that we're working on. When it's built, I will start taking applications for the next thing. I'm just kidding. But I think it's great what you're doing, and we do have to continue to build alliances with other African people.
Yes, thank you, Melati. And Gurmai, to your question about Tigrayan orgs working together, I think the simple answer is absolutely. I think the more synergy we can have within our community, the better. There's so much good work that each individual org is doing, and so if we can work together to further each other's missions and goals, yes. I don't know what you have in mind exactly, but I'm curious to learn more. Thank you.
And yeah, just quick, yes, we are more than happy to work with all the nonprofits here. The one good thing about Key Foundation is very modular, so it's customizable, right? So if it's something where it comes with therapy or trauma, then we can focus on those types of applications as well. If it has to do with something with financial stability or financial literacy or helping communities build wealth within the local communities and get them involved in Chamber of Commerce meetings, Rotary Club meetings, and build that power within the community where you guys are actually contributing from the wealth from just these local communities. That's just more voices for you guys to speak to. So absolutely, yes, that's one of the passions that Key Foundations has as well. And then luckily, we do have a vast network of people within the U.S. that will come and support and do a promotion and all that kind of stuff. So glad to collaborate with you all.
Thank you. Thank you for all your questions. So as we wrap up this panel, I want to thank all of our panelists, Meliti, Housen, and Cornell. I encourage all of you to stay connected with them on Twitter, on LinkedIn for Housen and Meliti on Twitter. Cornell will also, actually what I want to plug for Cornell is they have a booth in the back, so please make sure you connect with them. If you're part of an organization, make sure that's a contact info, that's an ally. We need to build bridges outside of our community, so make sure that you are talking to him. Talk to Meliti and talk to Housing as well, since they are championing this cause. Thank you all. Before you get up, I just want to encourage you, we do have another panel right after, and that topic will be building bridges with Tigray. We have a lot of folks that have been doing the work for a really long time, and we encourage all of you to stick around and listen to that one as well. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.